all that matters. All right, so we're going to continue our conversation. Well, really one-sided conversation about the history of visual media leading into where we are today, what are the lessons we learned, what are the big issues that we need to understand moving forward. It might be a good point in time to just kind of reiterate why we do this like history lesson, right? Why we go over the history of all this. There's the grandiose reason that you hear all the time of like, you gotta know your history. But it's because you can't understand the issues that are facing American media today without understanding what they've already been through, right? The past is prologue. It teaches us lessons about how we got to where we are today. So when we talk about later on this semester, we talk about those issues, right? We get into the section of the class that's all about like the impact of media on society. You got to know how we got here. You got to know that history to really fully understand why those issues exist and how those issues are going to likely play out. Right? So the next major moment in the history of visual media was in 1963 with the launch of the NET. The NET. NET stands for National Educational Television. And it's launched in 1963. You probably grew up watching the NET, but you call this something else. What did the NET become? PBS. Exactly. Just as NPR is the only publicly owned radio station in the country, NET, now PBS, is the only publicly owned television station in the country. And like I was talking about when we were brought up NPR in the radio section, the audio section, that publicly owned thing is significant because it demotivates sensationalism. When you don't have a profit motive, there's no motive to be sensational. There's no motive to go big. There's no motive to be absurd, to try and attract viewers. They don't have to worry about ratings because they don't have to worry about advertising. So in 1963, the NET launches, and it launches under that same guise of the Radio Act of 1927 that said that the airwaves are for the public good. All right, 1963, the government says, you know what, yeah, we should do that. We should have a television version for the public good. And so it launches what we now know as PBS with exactly the kind of programming you have today, right? Kid-friendly, pro-social, right? Mr. Rogers didn't start out in 1963, but very shortly thereafter, right? Your Mr. Rogers, your Bob Ross, your Sesame Streets, all of that comes along very shortly after. And it gives not only children's programming, pro-social programming, but also it gives adult programming, right? It's educational television. That's the whole goal, is to educate people on public matters as well as on just personal interest matters. And that's still the mission of PBS today. That's still why they exist today. In 1966, the MPAA introduces the rating system. This is the rating system you are familiar with today. Right? In 1966, the MPAA faced a kind of an existential crisis. Right? They had the Hays Production Code from 1930. That was been lingering along all this time. But there were more independent distributors and producers than there were in 1930. And so films that didn't meet the production code were getting out. Right? And a lot more films that people consider questionable morals were actually being distributed. And so the film industry kind of had a little, oh shit, what do we do now moment, where they realized if films that don't meet this moral standard keep coming out, people are going to want more and more regulation of the industry. So in 1966, the MPAA names a new president, a guy named Jack Valenti. And Jack Valenti would go on to be the president of the MPAA for like 40 plus years, right, until his death. The job that Jack Valenti had just before becoming the head of the MPAA was as the chief of staff for a guy named Lyndon Johnson. Before that, he was the chief of staff for a guy named John F. Kennedy. For those of you who aren't aware of what the chief of staff's role is they're basically the right-hand man of the President of the United States. So for years, Jack Valenti was highly, deeply involved in governmental affairs. He knew what was going on inside Washington, D.C. He knew what the conversations were. He knew what was on the forefront. He knew what was coming up. And so when Jack Valenti makes it to the MPAA, he tells them, hey, if we don't regulate ourselves, Congress will absolutely regulate us. And nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants that. No one wants an outside organization telling them what they can and can't do. They want to be autonomous. Everybody wants to make their own rules. So the MPAA develops this rating system. The basic gist of the rating system is we're not going to tell you what you can and can't do. But we are going to tell our audience what they should expect. The only kind of restriction of the rating system is that there's a gentleman's agreement amongst all of the members of the MPAA that says if a film is rated X at that time, now it's NC-17, if a film is rated X, you cannot advertise it. You can distribute it, you can show it, but you're not allowed to advertise it. Because you would be corrupting the children, right? You'd be exposing them to something they shouldn't see by advertising this film. So in 1966, the MPAA develops this rating system as a way of avoiding governmental regulation. It's a way for them to give creators more license and more freedom, right? Because it's no longer restrictive, you can't do this. It's a, if you do, there's limitations here that are placed on it. Here's a fun little civics lesson for you. Let's say eventually movie theaters open back up. Maybe. I don't know, one day. And you take your 12-year-old sibling to a rated R movie. And you get up to the ticket counter and you say, all right, I want one ticket for Fuckfest 2017, right? And you pay for the ticket for this one kid, and you say, all right, I'll pick you up after the movie, and you leave. Who has committed a crime there? The theater for selling you the ticket for a 12-year-old to an R-rated movie, or you for buying the ticket for a 12-year-old for an R-rated movie? Who's committed the crime in that instance?
It's not a crime, right?
Exactly. No one. Absolutely no one. There is nothing stopping the Lindo Theater from allowing a group of 6-year-olds into any R-rated movie that they show. Completely unaccompanied, right? Because that's what R is supposed to be, right? No one under 17, unless accompanied by an adult. You can drop off a fucking preschool class to whatever movie you want. There's no law. The consequence then is, if it happens enough and the MPAA finds out about it, then they might fine your theater, or maybe they just stop distributing movies to your theater, right? There's no crime there. That's one of the things that a lot of people get confused on. They're like, how can you allow children into this? Why the fuck not? USA, right? They paid. That's one of the worst fucking, I love going to see movies in theaters because I love the experience, but I fucking hate people. I went to see the Halloween remake, Rob Zombie's Halloween remake at the Lindo Theater, so this was a long ass time ago. And stupid me, I went to see it opening weekend, so all the fucking idiots are there, right? Well, there's a group of like 13-year-old girls, like 2 rows ahead of me, who just won't shut the fuck up the entire movie. And they're cackling, and they're commenting, right? They just won't shut the fuck up. And so I went to the front desk, I was like, hey, you got a whole row full of fucking minors here who are not accompanied, ruining the movie for everybody else. Can you do anything about it? And the manager of the theater said, no. So I stopped going to the window after that. I was like, just decency. Just, again, you can't, like, I'm not going to call the cops. It's not a fucking cop situation, right? But just decency. Like, it's there for a reason. Conversely, the rating system makes no fucking sense at the same time, right? There's a great documentary I suggest you watch. It's called This Film Has Not Been Rated. It's all about how absurd the rating system is, the MPAA rating system is. And they go through example after example of why did this film get an R but this film got a PG-13? You know? You think about some of those big blockbuster Arnold Schwarzenegger action films that are rated PG-13. But Saving Private Ryan is rated R. To this day, my mother refuses to watch Saving Private Ryan. Not because she doesn't like Steven Spielberg, not because she thinks Tom Hanks is a commie, because it's rated R. That's it. Just because it's rated R. It should be fucking required viewing. You could skip a whole week of history class in high school by just watching Saving Private Ryan. But I got an R. Why did Saving Private Ryan get an R, but Eraser got a PG-13 with Arnold Schwarzenegger? Why? Oh, there's blood. because it's a fucking war movie. Yeah, I would think there would be blood. Right? There's no rhyme or reason. There's not like a checklist that the MPAA goes through. It's not like the Hays Code, right? Where you can go and look and very objectively see, okay, I've shown too many millimeters of cleavage. Now I know why I got this rating. There's nothing like it's literally just a group of people watch the movie and go, yeah, I'd say PG-13. No rhyme or reason, just their feelings. Right? So on the one hand, fan-fucking-tastic. We don't have to worry about the government censoring films in the name of morality. On the downside, who the fuck is making these decisions? There's no oversight on who's making these decisions, which can have millions of dollars worth of consequences for filmmakers. In 1979, CNN launches. Remember on Friday when they did that really awesome drawing of transatlantic satellite broadcast? Right? It was like so hyper-realistic, you guys were kind of freaked out by how good it was. Yeah. Once we realized, oh shit, we can send a signal all over the world if we just bounce it off of space mirrors. It's not too long before Ted Turner realizes, well damn, not only do I have this superstation TBS, right, which was one of the first national entertainment channels, but what if I did that with news? And in 1979, he launches CNN. I was just like curious, anybody know where CNN is headquartered out of? No? Atlanta. Atlanta, Georgia. They're still headquartered out of Atlanta. They have their New York office, but they're still headquartered out of Atlanta. In 1979, news was getting to Atlanta from everywhere, and then being repackaged and distributed to the rest of the world from fucking Atlanta. You ever been to Atlanta? There's nothing fucking special about Atlanta at all. You travel 30 minutes outside of Atlanta and you're just being attacked by fucking bugs and hillbillies. There's no reason why Atlanta is fucking special other than that's where Ted Turner liked, right? And now it's, as of 1979, there it is. It's the news capital. That is where the world gets their news. It's from fucking Atlanta. The same could be true of Freeport. You know how fucked up that is. Freeport, Illinois has just as much capacity to be the global news headquarters. You could do everything CNN does from fucking Freeport, Illinois. Because we have just as much access to the sky as Atlanta, Georgia does. CNN not only launches this idea of international distribution of news, but also 24-hour news. CNN is the first channel where no matter what time of day it is, you can turn it on and know what's going on in the world around you. Prior to CNN, news, was a show, right? You had a 5 o'clock, a 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Some channels will do it at noon. But there were certain periods of time where you had to be watching if you wanted to see the news. Now you can just turn it on anytime. 24-hour news. There are a lot of pros and a fuck of a lot of cons to 24-hour news phenomenon, which we'll get to when we talk about journalistic issues. But it all started in 1979. In 1994, DreamWorks is formed. DreamWorks, their actual official name is DreamWorks SKG, which stands for Spielberg, Katzenberg, and Geffen. You probably recognize the Spielberg name, probably not so much the Katzenberg or the Geffen. Geffen is David Geffen. He's a record industry executive, probably one of the most influential record executives of the 90s. Steven Spielberg is, Steven Spielberg. And Katzenberg is just a guy who made a lot of money on movies. They launched DreamWorks SKG, and so who gives a shit? Why is that special? Because it was the first independent film studio created in 40 years. It was the first independent film studio created in decades. Spielberg and Katzenberg and Geffen got together and went, you know what, we got so many great ideas. We know so many other people who have so many great ideas, but they're not getting made. These movies aren't getting made, they're not getting put out there for the world to see. We're going to fix that. We're going to buck the studio system. We're going to revolutionize the way films are put out. And so they launched DreamWorks. And it works. Right? DreamWorks puts out some incredibly influential films. Right? They make a huge splash and they make a fuck ton of money. Right? So in 1994, we finally get a challenge to the studio. We get a challenge to that vertical integration system we talked about. We get somebody to come in and shake up the system and say, okay, yes, these are three of the wealthiest people in media, but it still proves that somebody can come in and shake up the system. It's not a completely closed system, right? So it's this revolution for independent film that only lasted about a decade. Because in 2006, they went, fuck it, we'll sell out. And in 2006, they sold all of their properties to Viacom. Independent film is a myth. There's a whole television station called Independent Film Channel. It's a fucking joke. There's no such thing as independent film. Independent film is stuff that your buddy makes in his basement and nobody sees outside of 12 people. There's a filmmaker in Rockford who made a horror film that made it onto Netflix. That's the closest you'll ever find to somebody making it an independent film. And you've never heard of it, and you've never seen it. If you ever did see it, you would forget it immediately afterwards.
What was it called?
I don't remember.
Did you ever hear The Darkening, that one that was here in Freeport?
Yes.
Yeah, one buddy of mine was in that. They thought it was like their big break. That would be terrible.
Of course not. Of course not. Because here's the like, I don't know if any of you guys are music people, if you're musicians, but I've had a lot of musicians in class through the years. And I always get this, like, oh, support local music, support local music. No. I'll support good music. If you're good, I'll support you. But I'm not going to fucking support you just because you live in the same fucking zip code as me. That's stupid. Same with independent film. Go support local filmmakers. Well, are they any good? Because here's the thing, if they're any good, they wouldn't be local anymore. If they're good filmmakers, they're not going to be local for very long. Independent film doesn't exist. What exists is independent filmmakers until you create a product that's marketable enough that you get bought out by one of the larger companies. It's exactly, fuck, if Steven Spielberg couldn't make it on his own, what the fuck makes you think Joe Bob from Stockton is going to pull it off? It's just not going to happen. As soon as you produce to the level where you're good, you're bought. You're bought. Independent film doesn't exist. Every film studio you've ever seen, their logo, you're like, oh, it's a great indie film company. Now, they're owned by fucking Viacom, or they're owned by Paramount, or they're owned by one of the other companies. They're just a subsidiary. There's no such thing as independent film. Sorry. Bursting your bubble. Then in 2006, Congress mandates that all television convert to digital high def. Not like immediately, right? Congress gave them a window. They said, all right, I think it was by 2010, you have to be broadcasting in digital high definition. At the time, this upset a lot of people because your television that you may have had for 20 years would no longer work. Once digital high def was the standard, you needed a new antenna. Right? You couldn't use the same old television to get a signal. You had to get a new digital antenna. Every television that was made after 2006 has a built-in digital tuner, right? So it's all compliant. But it required people to get new equipment to watch TV. The advantages of digital high def are obviously better quality signal, right? Better picture. But also, by converting to digital, you can now have multiple transmissions going on in the same band length, right? The same bandwidth. So, 13 WREX in Rockford, for example, right? In the good old days, before digital, it was you turn to 13 on your dial and there's WREX, and that was the only thing you were going to see on channel 13 is WREX's program. With digital, now there's 13.1, 13.2, 13.3, and 13.4. They're actually broadcasting 4 signals at the same time. Right? So your TV can now access 4 different channels on one stream. That means 4 times the generation of revenue for that station. Because now they're selling commercials not just on one station, but on 4 stations. So by mandating the digital conversion, yes, for the consumer it means a better quality product, but for the distributions, for the television stations, it means more advertising revenue. There's a significant amount of cost in that conversion, right? They had to upgrade all of their antenna, they had to upgrade a lot of their infrastructure. But in the end, it means that they can now ask more money for advertising, because they have 4 times as many streams of advertising revenue that they can tap into. In 2012, Netflix fucks everything up, and they start creating their own original content. Did any of you guys watch the Emmys last night? I didn't either. I have never understood why you would watch that shit. You can just get the results. I don't see why you would watch it. The Emmys, and now the Oscars, have had to change their standards over the last several years to allow for more streaming content to be eligible for awards. The Oscars, for example, for a long time, their standard has been you can only be nominated for awards if your film is released by this date, between this date and by this date, for theatrical release. Well, Netflix is so powerful now, they've had to change that. You no longer need a theatrical release to be nominated for an award. And look how fucking recent that is. It's 8 years. It's only 8 years that Netflix has been creating original content. Prior to that, if I had a show, if I developed a show, and I wanted it to be produced and distributed, I didn't have that many options, right? I could get one of the networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox to produce it. But if I do that, okay, well that significantly reduces the amount of swearing, the amount of sexuality, the amount of blood, right? I have to apply to broadcast standards, right? So I have to be family friendly if I want to go that route. Or maybe I could get HBO to produce it and distribute it. Well, that's fan-fucking-tastic, because they'll go all in. They'll go completely gory. Sure, that's great. They'll show all the sex and violence and language you want. But they're the only game in town. There's not a lot of, HBO has to really want it. It's not like they have to outbid other people. Right? Well, now, if HBO doesn't want me, Netflix might. Netflix can do the same content HBO does. All the swearing, all the violence, all the sex you want. Now, HBO has to step their game up. They have to start being more fiscally loose to attract good stories, to get the rights to good stories. Because, okay, cool, I could go to Netflix now. Netflix changes the dynamic of how shows are produced as well, because Netflix has zero interest in the old sitcom model of television studio production, where you have a set and you have multiple cameras rolling and you have an audience, right? They're no interest in it whatsoever. Netflix starts producing television the way you would produce films. And so their shows, instead of being, hour-long episodes, they're hour-long films. They also introduced the idea of binging, right, which is still like the greatest thing I think has ever happened to me, is the ability to binge. So, back in my day, if you wanted to watch a whole season of a show, you had to get up. You had to put a fucking disc or a tape in the player and play it, and then once that disc or that tape was over, you had to get up and put a different one in. And then now you just sit there and watch the whole fucking thing without moving. Even more so, you don't have to wait week to week. Netflix invented the idea of, let's just put the whole fucking season out now. And you can binge an entire season right then and there, the day it comes out. They started to pull back from that model. They're starting to do the weekly releases now, which annoys the shit out of me. But it really revolutionizes the way that we look at entertainment television and entertainment film. Because not only does Netflix have this opportunity to like, okay, now there's another way that filmmakers can get an income stream because now they can distribute via Netflix, not just Showtime, not just HBO. There's another competitor there. But also, how we look at making television, how we look at making films. It really did. It completely upended the industry, and those effects are still very much seen today. To the point where there are a lot of people who don't even have television. They just have Netflix. The cable cutters, right? There are a lot of homes that don't have a television subscription. They don't have Comcast. They just have Netflix and Hulu and YouTube. It's not that long ago that the thought of not having television was fucking foreign, was completely unheard of. Now it's almost becoming the norm. It's more and more normal for people to be cable cutters, to be entirely streaming in their home entertainment. If Netflix hadn't come out with their own original content, they would be forced to just be playing other people's scraps, putting on shows that needed television. Right? Like Friends had this big run on Netflix for a while there. People were watching Friends all over the place, which, fuck yeah, stupid show. If Netflix wasn't producing original content, they would be dependent on NBC to produce that show so that they can then run the reruns of it. Right? Netflix not having original content made them dependent on networks and dependent on film studios. All they were was a distributor. Now those other networks, now those other creators and those other film producers have to step their game up because they have to convince Netflix to buy their property. Before, Netflix needed their property. Now, Netflix doesn't need their property. Right? They can produce their own content and then fill in with their replaying of other people's stuff. So again, it changes the industry and it absolutely changes the consumer experience. Takes it in a whole new way, right? Very shortly thereafter, Hulu follows suit. Amazon Prime comes out. They immediately start launching original content. Now you got Disney Plus in the game. Right? There's so many. Here's a fun little Freeport connection for you. There's a streaming service called Tubi, T-U-B-I. Check it out if you haven't ever used it before. It's free television. Right? It's free streaming television. And they have films and other stuff on there. One of their chief executives is a Freeport native. Go you. You've never heard of him. You've never met him. He will never come back here, because why would he? It's kind of like Robert Johnson. You guys know Robert Johnson? Bob Johnson? Yeah? Who's Bob Johnson?
BET.
Yep, founder of BET. Man who founded BET. Where's he from?
Freeport?
Freeport! Woo! Why is my television studio not named the Bob Johnson Center for Media Production? Jesus! The man sold BET for over $1 billion. He's a billionaire. The man's a fucking billionaire from Freeport. He comes back every once in a while. He's still busy. He has family here. His cousin actually used to work at the college. She was awesome. I loved her. She was great. And then we laid her off because we're fucking stupid. We laid her off and gave the president a 19% raise or 12% raise. So, good for us. But Bob Johnson comes back every once in a while, but he never makes any noise about it. He doesn't want anybody to know when he's here. He doesn't want anything to do with this fucking town. Can't say I blame him. He grew up in Freeport in the 1950s and 60s, which wasn't exactly a welcoming time for a black man. So yeah, he doesn't really have a lot of love for Freeport, and I can't really blame him. Where I was going with all of this is that streaming content allows people from everywhere and anywhere to now be a mover in the game, to now be an important, significant figure in the game. I've mentioned a couple times Lovecraft Country on HBO. Is anybody watching that? Because you should. It's fucking fantastic. They shot a lot of that out here. They shot quite a bit of that out of White Pines in Carroll County. Jordan Peele produced it. I remember it was big news like last summer or the summer before. I'm like, oh my God, the Jordan Peele show is filming out here. Jordan Peele wasn't here. Like Jordan Peele never came anywhere near here. He was just kind of putting shit together on the back end. But that kind of content wasn't getting made before Netflix started creating content. Why would you put in the effort to do a show like that? It's a very unique show. It's very edgy, it's very controversial, it's very different. You don't take risks until you have competition. Netflix forced HBO, forced Fox, forced all these other companies to take risks. And we get better content out of it, right? We get much better content out of it. So where are we going? Where is visual production going in the future? Where's visual media going in the future? Before Corona, how often would you go to a movie theater to see a movie? Fairly often?
Every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday? Statistically speaking, not much. Statistically speaking, your generation didn't go to the movies very much. Right? Why not? Why wouldn't you go to the movie theater?
You can stream it.
Yeah, why would I? I could stay home and do it. I could pirate that shit. I could wait 6 weeks and get it digitally distributed in my house. I don't have to leave my house. Why would I pay that much money? Why would I pay $38 for a fucking tub of popcorn? Why I get to sit home? Fucking get high while I watch a movie. Nobody judging me, you know? So you can do that in theater. You can get high in a theater. It's just the people looking at money. I'm told. Theoretically. I don't know either. Before Corona, theaters were fucking terrified of the future because of streaming services. Right? Theaters were terrified of the future because of the competition that streaming had. Post-Corona, they were all putting their hopes and their dreams on the movie Tenet, right? The Christopher Nolan's newest film, Tenet. Like, oh, that's gonna bring people to the theater. Nope, no, it didn't. Even if there wasn't a national fucking pandemic happening, people weren't gonna go see Tenet in the theater. Not in the numbers they thought they were going to. Because people can recreate it at home. They can get just as good. It's not just as good. It's always better in a theater, but people don't care about that as much. Right? Also, as I mentioned, people are getting rid of television. People aren't willing to pay for television anymore. They're either getting it for free or they're just streaming everything on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon. What do you guys think is the future of film and television? You're young, you're dreamers, you're inspired souls. How do you take in films? Like, how do you watch movies?
I mean, probably mostly streaming.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still go to the theater before, for like the big, because I kind of like to see them kind of, but most people I still think just get them off streaming and kind of, or wherever they're available like that. So I think that's primarily going to be the future.
Okay.
I feel like theaters would be like a niche market, kind of like for records and stuff.
Yeah. How many of you guys ever saw Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs? Okay, that's in your age range, right? Like when that movie came out, you were the appropriate age for it. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs was put out by Sony Pictures. Okay? And they announced something absolutely fucking revolutionary when that movie came out. That, honest to God, I'm amazed hasn't become the norm by now. Sony put out a special offer. You could go to the theaters to watch Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Or you could stream it directly to your living room, same day, but only if you had a Sony internet-enabled television. If you had a Sony Bravia television, you could watch the movie the same day it came out in theaters. That is the perfect example of cross-platforming. The perfect example of that concept we've been talking about, where the one company takes over all of these other different levels. The only way you could see their product is if you had their television. Now we are getting same-day distribution via, streaming services now, right? Because of Corona, you're seeing that. You're seeing movies that are being released on Amazon the same day they're in theaters. But to me, it's only a matter of time before film companies start branding it specific to their other product merchandise, right? Comcast owns Universal Pictures. I think there's going to be a time in the not too distant future where, just like in the olden days, you could only see an RKO film if you went to an RKO theater. I think it's only a matter of time before you're only going to be able to see Universal Pictures on Comcast streaming media. Disney already does that. You want to see the new Mulan? Which you don't, trust me. You want to see the new Mulan? You gotta have Disney Plus. It's the only place you're gonna be able to watch it. Once Disney, as a corporation, starts branching out into the television set production, once they start making actual television sets, once they purchase Zenith or something like that, yeah, it's only a matter of time before you can only watch Mulan if you have Disney Plus and you have this television. And there's nothing to stop them from doing it. Nothing to stop them from doing it. It's the perfect way to maximize your profitability off of your product. That's my personal prediction on where the future of film and television is going.
Yeah, I think that too.
Yeah. I'm a cynical bastard. Make no mistake about it. Like, I very well could just be a horrible, horrible person who wishes ill things to happen because I was, traumatized as a child. That's possible, theoretically. Not that I was.
But there are like a bunch of people already coming out with streaming services of their own stuff,
Exactly.
and like you're only going to be able to get it here, blah blah blah. So it's already happening.
Peacock,
Yeah.
CBS, fucking HBO is repackaging their streaming service every 13 fucking minutes. Like it's. I can't help but think that's where it's going.
The funny thing with some of those though is they're trying to launch it, but they don't have like any backlog that people actually want to see. I think the only reason people watch these shows is because they were available to everybody anyway.
Yep, exactly. Nobody was chomping at the bit to watch this shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they think they were.
Yeah.
They've confused availability with interest. So I think it's going to be an interesting time. The backlash to that then becomes what you're already seeing now, where streaming was a backlash to cable television, right? People were converting to streaming because they were tired of the prices of cable. Well, now, with all the different multitude of streaming services that have exclusivity, there's not really a cost savings over television. So now there's a backlash to all the streaming services because there's too many of them. And you got to pay so much money to be able to view all this different content. So where do we go from there? Again, personal prediction, I think it goes the way of Napster. I think you're going to see a hell of a lot more piracy in film and television. I think torrenting sites like Pirate Bay are going to be blown up in the next 5 years. They're going to be all over. That's going to be where people get their content, is from torrenting sites, even more than today. Well, again, let's look at what happened in the recording industry. Napster gets shut down, iTunes launches. They go, oh, okay, you like this? Well, then we'll give it to you in a different pay package with rights. Torrenting's going to be all kinds of popular again. It's going to get really boosted up in terms of usage. So the film companies are going to have to respond. And they're going to repackage streaming, where it's not going to be about, you have to have this service to get this show. I think they're going to take a different approach to it. Predicting the future, probably wrong, but
I've seen Amazon Prime, they're doing a thing where you just like buy channels of content that you add on to that you're already, I feel like a lot of them are going to start doing that kind of stuff.
Yep.
You buy like bundles of stuff for cheaper amounts.
Yep. They're going to be, I've said this before, right? It's like fishing, right? It's the way that media works. It's the way that news works. You throw your bait in the water, and if it hits, you keep throwing it. If it doesn't hit, you find new bait. You're going to see a whole bunch of variation. And again, that's why HBO is changing their approach to streaming every 13 minutes. It's because they're trying to find the right bait to get the most fish. So like, okay, you didn't like it if it was a standalone service. Okay, well, what if we package it with all this other shit? You didn't want just HBO. What if it's HBO plus all this other stuff? Well, if HBO Max doesn't take off, if that doesn't make the money they think it should be making, we'll repackage it again, throw out differently. And you're going to see a lot of services doing that over the next probably 5-7 years. Taking a lot of really weird new looks at like, okay, how can we make this interesting? How can we make people not hate us? Kind of a thing, right? 4K is going to be replaced in the next decade by 8K. Be ready for that. You're going to have to buy all your shit all over again. How many of you even have a 4K television now? Does anybody even have a 4K? I do, because I have to. I don't think I could, like, in good conscience, teach this kind of shit and not have 4K televisions in my own home. But yeah, within the next decade, we're going to be going to 8K. 8K means you got to have new production equipment. Means you got to have new, better broadcast distribution strength. Right? Now that we have, we're getting better and better internet signal strength by the day, better and better cell service rates by the day. That means that we're going to be able to broadcast in 4K a hell of a lot easier, just in time for us to upgrade to 8K. Right? It's just going to keep moving forward. Television and video production is just going to keep on moving forward. Well, you guys are really talkative today. I appreciate that. Makes me feel good about my life choices. Thank you. That's all that. Yeah, look at that. It's 10:45. So, what do you get when you cross an elephant and a rhino? Elephino. Get it? Fuck it. I drive an hour to get here, people. I wake my fat ass up at 6 in the morning so I can get ready and drive an hour through little podunk ass chicken fucking towns so I can come here and try and educate you people. And this is what I get. Monsters. They're all fucking monsters. Looking right at you. All right.